Okay? All right, I'm Frank Massavice, and Massavice is pronounced as if you had a big iceberg and you were on it. It's a mass of ice. And I'm 97 years of age. I was born in 1919, and in my first year of birth, I almost died. I was a very sickly child, and my mother tells me that it was come and go situation at times. She thought I was going to depart from this world and not continue. But fortunately, with the help of God, I survived, and I have now reached the age of 97 years, and I feel like I'm in my 20s. I really do. I'm not sick. I'm not ill. The only thing I have missing is my stability. In the Polish neighborhood of the name of the street was Pulaski Avenue. It was lined totally Polish and Bohemian, Slovakian, but basically Polish. And I grew up.
Did you have, so you lived in a
I lived in
apartment
the
or a
Polish.
house?
No, we rented. My mother rented an apartment, and to make a long story short, my dad passed away when I was 3 years of age, and I was left with my mother, my older brother who was named Anthony, and my two younger brothers, one named Felix, and the other one named Anthony, and myself.
Right.
So you're the second child, second kid.
I'm the second. So when my older brother died in a swimming accident at Lake Erie, so that left my mother, myself, and my brother Felix still alive. And
How did your mom support you when you were?
my mom supported us by doing housework for a Jewish neighborhood, because I was born on Pulaski, which bordered a place called Rockefeller Park, and it was also called Guinea Hill. Guinea being because of the neighborhood being Bohemian and Slovakian, and we were next door to the Jewish neighborhood, which was 105th Street. And my mother did housework for a Jewish neighborhood in order to support her children. So I grew up there, and I went, when I was of age, I walked to kindergarten, which was a public school on Pulaski Avenue, and well, really on Sawinski Avenue, which was next door to Pulaski Avenue. And I went to kindergarten there, and then my mom took me out of kindergarten and she put me in a Lithuanian school, which was a Catholic school at 67th and Superior Avenue. So I had to walk to kindergarten for about, I'd say about 6 miles.
Wow.
So did your mom speak English or?
No, she had broken English.
Yeah.
My mom, we didn't have television that day, when 1919.
1990. Okay.
So all we had was a radio. My mom got supplemental from the assistance from the city. A social worker would give her what they call it, a widow's pension. So my mom used that, plus her work at the Jewish home, for a private home. So she supported us, and we had a butcher that was Lithuanian, and he was very nice to my mother. He gave her credit, so she used to buy food and meat and stuff on credit, and then she would pay him a little each month to try to keep us going. So in essence, we were very poor. You talk about a poor family.
Yeah.
I used to eat large sandwiches. We'd get Bohemian bread from a baker. He used to stop every day in the neighborhood and deliver bread. And we had milk delivered also. And for sometimes you'd have the pumpernickel bread, which was the dark bread. All you'd have was lard that we got from a farmer. He gave us in mason jars, you know, and just spread it on the on a loaf, and then you get a treat by getting an onion, and cutting an onion and putting it on the so-called sandwich. No meat.
What was your favorite games with other kids at that time? Games or toys?
Well, no, the games were, as I grew older, I was the head of a gang.
Oh.
And we were a rough gang, tough gang, but we didn't steal. But we were a tough gang. The only thing we did do, and I had no part of it, but I didn't stop it, was some of the Jewish kids would cross Rockefeller Park and so-called invade the Guinea Hill and the Polish neighborhood. Part of my gang would literally rob them of the change they had in their pockets, you know?
Oh.
And they'd take their pants off and throw them up in a tree and that, and make the kid, poor Jewish boy, climb a tree to get his pants. But anyway, we got a reputation that our neighborhood, the police department was on Superior Avenue, which was about a mile away from where we lived, because we lived on Pulaski. The streets were Pulaski, Sawinski, Kosciuszko, Medina, and Simon. I had cousins living on Simon Avenue, which was about 3/4 of a mile away from us, that I would visit once in a while to play with my cousin Joey. And I got the reputation of, since I was a so-called gang leader, of my future would be that I would wind up in jail.
You're like a godfather.
No, which never happened.
How about your brothers and?
No, my brother Anthony always used to my older brother Anthony died when he was a teenager. So I really didn't have him long enough. When I was 12 years of age, or 13, my brother Anthony died of a swimming accident.
Right.
A witness saw my brother being pushed off a pier. We had a pier that was formed by huge rocks or stones. And he used to walk along the pier, and my older brother was sitting on the pier, and he noticed somebody push him. And as he pushed him, he struck his head on one of the rocks, and they dug him well, they got him out of the water, and he lived for 9 days in Mount Sinai Hospital. If he'd have lived another day, which would have been the 10th day, the doctor said he would have lived, but he would have been bedridden. So that was a good thing that my brother died, because it would have killed him to be bedridden for the rest of his life.
And then Felix had some problems too.
Pardon?
Felix was sick too.
Yeah, well, Felix, he fell in a basement at where we rented a house. And we had a landlady that was really, really a sweet woman. She only charged us a minimum for rent, just so that my mother could raise her kids. She felt sorry for my mother. So she was very, very good to us. But we had that old-fashioned basements. They weren't painted, they were just dark. And I had a coal furnace. Well, Felix fell down the stairs going down the basement, and he ultimately got his knee swelled up, and it became pus. Developed 3 pus holes that contained pus, and my mother listened to a stupid witch that lived in the neighborhood. I call her a witch because she conned my mother into saying that she could cure my brother, and she manipulated his leg and I think she worsened the condition that he was under, and he wound up in a hospital, and he lost his kneecap, and it was replaced with 2 inches of silver. So he stayed at Rainbow Hospital, which was a part of the division of Mount Sinai Hospital, and the doctors kept him there for 3 years as an example of their technique in surgery and that. And I was not allowed to see him. I used to go with my mother on a streetcar to visit my brother, and she would go into the hospital, but I was not allowed in the hospital, so I had to stay out in the yard, and I would see my brother from a distance. So I really didn't couldn't talk to him and all, but he was in the hospital for 3 years, and he wound up with a stiff leg. So as I grew up, I ultimately got a job as in order to help my mother support the family, delivering milk to the homes. So then I had 3 friends that were part of my gang, and one of them was Duke. His name was Duke, and he had a sister-in-law, and a brother who worked at Lakeside Hospital. So they offered to get me a job at Lakeside Hospital, but I had to get a work permit in order to work the job, and I was 16 years of age. So, and I was in high school at the time. So before I went to work, I had to go to the school and ask each teacher if I could graduate with my graduating class so that I could get a diploma. So they all agreed that I had enough smarts, I guess. So they allowed me to come and graduate with my graduating class. So that's how I wound up getting my high school diploma from Eastside School, and I started working at Lakeside Hospital.
You know, during that time, alcohol was illegal, banned. So they had speakeasy bar.
Was that your
Oh,
stepfather?
yeah, that was that.
Yeah, we want that story.
God, she knew that one?
Yeah.
She knows all kinds of stories,
God.
Frank.
Well, anyway, we used to go to get beer, okay? And we'd go to 105th and St. Clair Avenue, and they had a bar there that we would meet, and we'd get 3-2 beer at the bar, and then when we left the bar, we would go to a Greek restaurant just down the street, and we would get chili in a bowl, and we'd get hamburgers, and but our big treat was going to the bar. And no girls, we didn't go, we had no dates when I was a teenager, and no dates.
Was the bar a speakeasy or a regular
No,
bar?
the bar wasn't that really that important. The important thing was that right after the bar, they had the draft started, and I did not go to the war, World War II, because I had enough points, a number that kept me away, and I was working to help support my mother, raise my brother, because he came home from the hospital, but he wound up with a stiff leg. My brother, Felix. So I stayed out of the Army until 1943. And then I got called up because they were short of people, and they renewed the draft, and I got called up. So I got called up, and I wound up going to Columbus, Ohio for my basic training, and I left there and went to St. Louis, Missouri for additional training. So to make a long story short, I left I joined when I was in the service, and first went into the service, I took an SAT test for the Army, but I scored that well that they allowed me to turn around and become a cadet for the Air Force rather. I joined the 8th Air Force, which was not a division by itself. Well, it was not part of the 8th the Air Force was a part of the Army then. It was a division of the Army. But while I was in basic training, they became a division of its own. It became the 8th Air Force of its own. So I went to Southwestern College in Memphis, Tennessee for my cadet training. And I stayed there for over 6 months when they discovered they had too many people in as pilots. So they sent me to bombardier school. I was going to be a bombardier. So I didn't stay in bombardiers too long, but I had the officer's uniform. The only thing I lacked was the second lieutenant's bars on my shoulders. So, to make a long story short again, they decided that they had enough bombardiers, so they turned around and decided that they would turn around and send me to gunnery school. Well, I went to Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, and they wanted to make me a gunner in a B-24. A B-24 had a lower ball underneath the B-24. The gunner was in a glass globe underneath the B-24. But in order to climb into the B-24, you had to manipulate mechanically or electrically to get the door in a position where you could lift the trap door and climb into the B-24 to get out and put your parachute on. And Frank being a cadet, being a little smarter than the average bear, I could not picture myself as climbing into the ball and it's shot up. Now the mechanical system is broken, the electrical system is shot up, and I'm trying to turn the ball around to climb up into the plane in order to put a parachute on and then jump out the side of the window. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. In the meantime, the plane is doing one of these, it's shot, you know, and boom. Or if the ball is all shot and I couldn't retract it, and landing, they would wipe out the ball. The ball would wipe out, and I'm inside the ball. So I said, no way do I want to be inside that ball. So I turned around and told them that I wanted to go to leave the gunnery, and I wanted to join the infantry, because if you left the Air Force, you automatically became part of the infantry. They didn't horse around with you. So I was being sent to a court-martials. We had a court-martial was a captain, which was a woman, a major, and a lieutenant being on the board, and they interviewed me because I told them that I was afraid to fly. And that's why I wanted to leave the gunnery school. And they said, well, how come you want to flee? The female is the one that tried to get me. She says, how come you try to turn around and go to gunnery school? Fly, and now you say you're afraid to fly. And I told him, I says, well, I didn't know, because I never flew in a plane. I never had an adventure in a plane. So to make a long story short, she's the one that tried to get me to go into the thing, infantry. And infantry, you automatically, you're a ground trooper. No way does Frank want to be in infantry where you're walking and hiking. So I wanted, and the captain, the major, he says, do you know what's going to happen to you? And I said, yes, sir. He says, what? I said, you're going to send me to the infantry. He says, what do you mean we're going to send you to the infantry? Who told you that? I says, that is not what we send. He says, you're willing to go to the infantry? And I said, yes, sir. I don't want to fly. So he says, well, soldier, he says, you got a big surprise. He says, we can't afford to lose a soldier with your intelligence because of your SAT score. Instead of infantry, we're going to turn around and send you to Dope and Fabric School, which was part of the Air Force, where you replace ailerons and wings and so on with dope and canvas, and you stretch them, and then you sewed. You had a sewing machine. And anyway, I went and joined that, and I went to I wound up at Kelly Field in San Antonio, Texas. And I was there for a while, and then from San Antonio, Texas, we went to, and I finished my gunnery, my Dope and Fabric School. We went to aboard ship to go to overseas. So we were scheduled to go to Okinawa. So when we left Seattle aboard the train, before we left, I won about $500 playing poker aboard,
That's pretty good.
in the barracks. But on the train, I lost the $500.
Oh,
So my brother Felix, he was now working for Zoe Burr jewelry store. So he sent me the money to get me out of the hole. Well, from Mogmog, we finally got, it took us 56 days in all to get to Enewetak. And when we got there, the island was not secured. And by that I mean the Japs had not given up yet. So we boarded landing craft that dropped the nose down, the door down, and then you got in
Yeah.
the water and you went, well, duffel bag, and jumping aboard, and you went on out of the island. And that Christmas, I'll hurry it up for a minute. That Christmas, we found out from our captain that when we hit the island, we did not have any ammunition. We had
No bullets in your guns?
no, we had a gun, we had a duffel bag, we had well, I don't know if we were supposed to spit at the enemy because the island wasn't secured, you know?
Oh, wow.
But, and
Tell us about the goat.
then the very first week we were aboard the island, we lived in pup tents. You shared your tent half with the next guy. So you had two halves, but ultimately we wound up with a bigger tent. But 6 of us were in one tent. Well, first week I drew guard duty. Well, I kept hearing this noise as we were patrolling this dirt road that surrounded the encampment. And I finally decided I better tell the guy that pulled guard duty with me that he heard the same noise. I said, so you go down on that side of the ditch and I'll go down on this side of the ditch. And when we heard the noise, we'll both open fire, you know? Because I decided that if I'm gonna kill somebody, this is war. It's either he kills me or I kill him. So I'd rather kill him than he kills me.
Right.
So I turned around and I heard this rustling again in the woods. And just as I took aim, you know, I was ready to fire, and there an animal, a goat, came out of the bushes at me, and I said, boy, the scared left me. I don't know how to explain it, but what a relief, you know, that it wasn't a human. Then I didn't have to shoot and kill somebody. I don't care if he was a Jap. It's just that I wasn't in a position to kill a human being.
And then you became a chef, right, at some point?
Oh yeah. After a fashion, they start discharging because they dropped the 2 bombs. Come to think of it, I never heard the bombs will go off in Japan, and we were only 90 some miles away from Japan on Okinawa. So anyway. What was I going to say? Oh, they were discharging the people from the army, and they put them aboard ship and returning them to the States. Well, that included anybody that had the points. So it was your age plus the number of years service you put in the army, total determine whether or not you got discharged sooner or later. Well, they lost the cooks because they were going home for discharge. Well, the captain of our outfit had to get a replacement for the cook. Well, during that whole period of time, they were also building Quonset huts out of and making mess halls out of them. And these Quonset huts were huge, and they would hold about 500 to 1,000 eaters. People eat in these Quonset huts. So he's in my record that they had on me. I was corporal by then. The captain says, "You're going to become a cook." I said, "No, I'm not going to become a cook," because cooks were disliked. Because cooks had to dish out the meat and the chow line, and you had to be sure that you give one chop and not two chops, because you had to give enough chops to last hundreds of people, you know. So he says, "Yes, you are going to become a cook." He says, "You're either going to become a cook or we're going to court-martial you." So I became a cook. And I no sooner said, "Yes, I'll become a cook." He says, "No," he says, "you're going to become the executive cook. You're going to be in charge of the mess hall. And you're going to have a Jeep and a driver to drive you around mess hall to mess hall." So, okay, the mess hall, first mess hall they drove me to, they had 7 LP gas stoves there. Each cook, they got 7 cooks to operate each stove, you know. And I says, "Okay," to them, "cook breakfast, you know. I'm the executive chef, you cook breakfast." Well, they don't know what they'll serve for breakfast. I said, "What do you mean you don't know what to serve for breakfast? You're a cook." "Oh, no." So it wound up, I'm telling them how to make pancakes, and I had them, all 7 of them working and making pancakes, and the word spread that our mess hall was making pancakes for breakfast. So all the other mess halls, the guys left their mess halls, they come to my mess hall. And they're turning around and I had those 7 cooks, they're cooking through the lunch hour, the next lunch hour. And they're supposed to be getting ready for lunch. They were still making pancakes. So I wound up 2 hours late for the next meal.
Oh, jeez.
So we didn't have lunch for 2 hours later. So that was the end of that deal with the cooks. And the same thing almost happened with the turkeys. I had eight turkeys to cook for Thanksgiving. So I cooked the turkeys, and the other so-called cooks, I made them carve it. So we had turkey for Thanksgiving. So then the regulation stated that before the officers built Quonset huts, or sleeping areas for themselves, they had to make it for the GIs. Well, the very first Quonset hut that went up was for the colonel who was in charge of the whole division. He made the first Quonset hut for him and his mistress. He used one of those Okinawan girls
Oh, jeez.
for a home, so he took care of himself. So by that time we had all the mess halls built. And I was riding around, I'd wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning and get driven to the mess hall and had my steak that came in from Australia, steak and eggs for breakfast. Then I'd drive around the island, Okinawa, with my driver.
Nice.
So I said, the next time there's a war, I'm going to volunteer to be the cook, because you're on for 24 and you're off for 24. So you didn't work one day, you work a 24-hour period, and the next day you were off and through. So then came time for my discharge. So I had enough points, so I formed a line, and we went aboard the ships that were in the harbor, and we went aboard landing craft to go to the ships that aboard the netting. They had nets over the side, and I had my duffel bag, my rifle, and gas mask and everything, and I'm trying to climb up the netting, and I slip, and I start falling, and I can't swim. And I thought, this is it, Frank, goodbye. And the sailor that was aboard the landing craft, he saw what was happening to me, and all of a sudden he come in the boat, running up towards me, and he whacks me with his body, and I grabbed the damn netting again, and I finally made it up the net. I could have lost my life on Okinawa trying to get home through the netting. And then when I come home, well, we went to Indianapolis, to make a long story short, for my discharge. So I turned around and went into town to catch my train. So I had time, so I went into the barber shop, and I got a clean shave and all, because I was going to meet Lou, and Ruth, her sister Ruth, was with her. And they were going to meet me at the terminal tower inside. So I made it to the terminal tower, and as I was going up in the tower, I saw Arlene and Lou and her sister walking, her stepsister, walking in the mezzanine. So I come behind them, and I took my duffel bag and I skimmed it across the
Their legs.
the mezzanine, the floor,
Okay.
and I caught her in the back of the leg, but she didn't fall. I was pretty lucky.
Okay, let's start again now.
Okay.
Okay, I met Lou when I worked at the hospital before I was even in the service, and she was assistant cook of vegetables with Lee, who got me the job at Lakeside Hospital. So I used to tease the hell out of her, and she'd try to get even with me and this and that. And one day she spilled 20 gallons of oil that they were making mayonnaise, and one of the colored guys that was working there, he mopped up the floor, cleaned it all up for her, and she asked me what she could get him, and I said, give him a carton of cigarettes. So she gave him a carton of cigarettes for mopping up all the oil. And that's pretty nasty stuff, but when you only have a mop, you know. And then I had a couple dates with Lou when I came on furlough from the Army, and we went out, and I took her to the Statler Hotel one time, and another place another time. But anyway, I was in the service. Well, to begin with, I got a letter. The mailman in the service, he'd always smell the envelopes, and he'd get a kidding, you know. And Lou started by sending me blue envelopes, letters. One letter led to another letter, and I repeated or answered her letter. And next thing you know, we were involved, just through mail. So when I came home in the service, I took her out to the Statler, to the room, the dining room, and the maitre d' didn't want to serve her because he figured she was underage. So we had to prove to the maitre d' that she was certainly of age. So when I took her home that night, they lived on Neff Road. That was in Euclid, Ohio. So we were sitting on a back porch on a swing. They had a back porch to the house on Neff, and they had a swing. And next thing you know, I'm kissing her, she's kissing me, and I turn around and I proposed. And she accepted. So that's how, basically through letters is where the romance really started. And when I tried to marry her in a Catholic church, the priest wouldn't do it. I went to St. George's where I went to school. I went to St. Philip's on St. Clair. I went to St. Thomas on Superior Avenue. None of them would marry me because Lou was not a Catholic. So her sister Ruth, or stepsister Ruth, made arrangements with her minister, Reverend Lee. He was on Mayfield Road near Arlington or something street, as I recall. And he said, yeah, he would marry us. So we got married in a Presbyterian church. And we got the day of our wedding, we went to the apartment that we rented on the 71st and Addison. And my God, honey, you never saw so many cockroaches in your life. That place was loaded, just loaded with cockroaches. So we used to turn around and I'd take her to the show, 2 shows downtown and 2 shows at Isella, which was on Superior Avenue, just so that we could not have to go to the bathroom in that apartment house, because Lee, she owned an apartment on Scioto in East Cleveland, and she put pressure on one of her tenants to move her out, and she got the apartment for Lou and me. And the minute they moved out, I made sure that every stitch of clothing that was put in the car did not have a cockroach in it. So that I brought it over to the apartment. So we finally lived in the apartment for about 9 years. And then I finally bought, my brother was a jeweler, worked in a jewelry store by that time. He loaned me $2,000 to help me buy a house at Chapman in East Cleveland. And that's where we lived for 9 years, in Chapman in East Cleveland. So we left Scioto, and that was the extent of. But I've worked about 10 or 12 different jobs, different companies, because I no sooner got a job here, I was already looking for another job that paid more money. So I'd work maybe 3 months here, another 4 months here, but what the cardinal rule is, the last one in rather is the first one out when they get laid off. So I used to get laid off almost every time I had to find another job. So I worked as a boiler maker, I worked as a sheet metal maker, I worked for Chase Brass, rolling big copper and brass ingots in a mill, reducing it to thin gauge, maybe a 32nd thick or an 1/8 of an inch thick, or whatever the order was, So that didn't last long, but they paid good money, Chase Brass. But my only goal, then when I got the kids, when I got Tony and Seal, I had to get a job that paid more money, because now I had a family. And to me, the biggest thing in my life was my wife and my family. They come first. In that order. My wife was first, my kids were first. And I had to get a job to take care of them and give them what they needed in life, not just me, you know. And that's been my goal my whole life. My family always came first. So that's basically the saga.
How did you became an engineer then eventually?
Oh yeah, well I worked for Apex Electric. They made washing machines and electric dryers and stuff. And I worked in the shipping department. Well, I got laid off in the shipping department, but I understood that they had openings in their mechanical engineering department. So I took mechanical engineering when I was in high school. So I knew a little bit, so I also took a special course at John Hayes School just to learn a little more math and the ability to be a draftsman. So because I started off as a draftsman, and I made good work in making layouts and work. Because what I did in high school helped a heck of a lot. So I worked for then at Apex for a while. Then I left Apex because I got tired of the first. I didn't care for the first, the vice president. So when I was shaving one morning, I said, "The hell with this." I went out and I went to Tow Motor. I applied for a job, and that's where a guy that used to work for Baker Industrial Truck, they also made electric cars. I used to work for them as a draftsman, chief draftsman, because when I went to Tow Motor, Ed Suratek hired me. He used to work for Bailey Meter. So in working for Bailey Meter, I worked for about 2 years, and they were giving promotions, and he skipped me. So I asked to talk to Ed Suratek personally. So I talked to him, and I told him, how come I'm being passed up, you know? So he's the one that made me a design engineer, and I worked for Caterpillar as a design engineer in their engineering department for 14 years. And that's where I'm drawing my meager pension from them and Social Security now from the federal government. So that's the history of, a quick history of Frank Massillite. I played Class E Muni League, which is for teenagers 17 and up. I played, they had a baseball team, that was a Class E. If you were to go to Class F, that's the next grade. So I played Class E baseball. I played third base for the Brazos brothers, who were tailors. They made suits for tailoring. They made baseball uniforms for us and all. And I played third base, but I got to be a pretty good hitter. So the scout for the St. Louis Cardinals, he approached me one day because they scout around all the minor league teams looking for talent for the majors. So he approached me and offered me a contract because I was a home run hitter to play for the St. Louis Cardinals. I would have grabbed it in a minute but he offered me only $100 a month. Well, the $100, I have to give something to my mother, and that's more than $25. You had to give her at least 75, you know. So then that leave me $25. How can I live on $25 as a ball player with the hotels and food and all, because you play a lot of out-of-town games, and even in the minor leagues, you had different teams. So I had to turn the offer down. I couldn't accept it. That's why I wound up working for Lakeside Hospital. But there I paid $50. I got $50 a month, and of that 50 a month, I would give my mother 35, and I would keep 15, and of the 15, I'd keep 10, because I had $5 went for a pass on a streetcar. I had to get to work, so I used the $5 a week to show this pass, and that paid for my fare to get to my job. So I only had $10 a month. That's where I get the 3-2 beer for that place on St. Clair Avenue.
Becca wanted to know, what's the most amazing invention you've seen in your lifetime?
Invention?
Like you saw radio, cars, airplanes, TV. I mean, one
Well,
stand out.
No, what fascinates me, I think, is that iPhone. I think that's the damnedest thing. That's the damnedest thing you ever saw in your life. You know, you Seal, we go to Baker Square for breakfast. I ask her something, she pulls out the iPhone and she's got the answer right there.
Right.
It's amazing. Truly amazing.
So that beats out airplanes and TV.
Yeah, everything.
Everything.
She can buy anything too.
Okay. Right.
Any department store she can buy. She can tell you what time a restaurant opens. Everything.
Yeah.
It's amazing. No, television is fascinating, but it's very addictive. But for knowledge and usefulness, that iPhone can be beat.
I didn't expect that.
Have to buy him an iPhone.
Yeah.
For Christmas.
Well, we lived on Toyota, and we had a beautiful garden in the back that Lou had made in the back. And Seal had just started to walk. And she was walking amongst the flowers, and she'd go to the rose bush, and she'd always smell the roses, put them to her nose, and that always tickled the hell out of me. I recall her walking around and admiring the roses and all, because my mother, my grandma, or my mother, she was a good gardener. She was a good cook, and she was a good gardener. And she learned to cook from her grandma, and Seal became a beautiful cook, because I used to come home from work and I'd catch her crying, and I said, "What are you crying for?" She showed me what she was cooking, burnt on her or something. I said, "Look," I said, "you know where the garbage can is?" I said, "You throw the food in a garbage can when it's burned, and you start all over again." I said, "You'll learn." And she learned. She learned to be a damn good cook, and she learned to be a better baker than a cook, really. And Tony, I can remember teaching him how to play first base. He became a real excellent fielder. And I tried to get him that first baseman's job with that one team, and that coach gave it to his son. He didn't give it to Tony. So I told him that was the facts of life. That some things you get, some things you don't get.
How about a favorite holiday memory, Christmas memory with your family?
Oh, when the kids start arguing amongst themselves who got more gifts. The kids used to blame Seal for getting more gifts than Seal and Tony. And, well, they'd get at least 10 to 15 gifts individually. I used to go to a place on Prospect called H&H, and you used to get kids' toys at a real nice big discount. So we used to buy 10 to 15 toys each. And that's for Gregory and for Jerry and for Tony and for Seal. So that's a hell of a lot of Christmas presents.
Now, how about your granddaughters? Do you have any favorite stories about Becca and Rachel?
Yeah, Becca hiding behind my rocker. Whenever she got ready, scared of something on television, she'd come run and hide behind my chair. Because Grandpa would protect her.
Anything with Rachel?
Oh, Rachel would take her to the mall, and the first thing she would do is she'd stop the other ladies walking down, and try to beg chewing gum from the lady. Do you have any chewing gum?
Remember what you taught her?
Oh, the wink. Oh, yes, I taught Rachel the wink, and she'd wink with both eyes. You know, one left one and the right one. I try to teach that to Luke.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't get it. And I haven't tried it on
David?
David yet.
So what would you like your children and grandchildren to remember about you?
Oh, that I love them.
That's a good one. Anything you want to say just to finish up?
Oh no, don't try to sell this.
Okay.
Well, we really appreciate you doing it, Dad. I know that Seal's certainly going to love watching this, and Becca and Rachel, and then our grandsons who don't know all these stories will hear them for the first time someday. So thank you for doing it.